podcast on real relationships. My name is Sophie Passon, and I am a relationship expert, international speaker, and best-selling author of the book Your Other Half. I decided to start this podcast because, in my opinion, relationships are currently not being portrayed as what they really are. Whether you're watching the news or TV, social media, the perception given to people is wrong. And my aim is to talk about what happens in the real world, talk about real stories, and listen to what real people think to or go through, as opposed to creating expectations of something that doesn't actually exist. I may not agree with everything that is said by my guests, but it is their chance to express their opinions and their stories. And here today we have Stacey Miller, and we're going to talk about how to handle mental health issues. Hi, Stacey.
Hi, Sophie. Thank you for having me today.
No worries at all. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, I'd love to. So my name is Stacey Miller. Business name is Stacey Miller Consultancy. And in a nutshell, I work in training and education around anything wellbeing related, really. So training professionals like teachers and the police. And then education-wise, I do loads of stuff in schools, teaching young people, parent evenings. And I also run lots of conferences for professionals and for young people as well.
Fair enough. So mental health, there's two different sides to this. There's obviously our own, and then there's looking out for others.
Absolutely. And I think it both are really important. It's so important. Mental health is huge, really. Thinking about how many people are affected by mental health, we will all be affected by that, whether it's ourselves, whether it's through friends, family. So statistically, just to give a little bit of context to it, 1 in 4 young people will experience a mental health problem in any given year. Mm-hmm. And then it's slightly less for young people, it's 1 in 10, but adults, it's 1 in 4. That's like 25%. And if you really think about it and want to analyze it, it's probably a lot more than that, because that statistic is what we know of. So I do think it's probably higher. And if I'm honest, and I don't really want to be negative because I try not to be negative, but the statistic is probably, it's a real underrepresentation. And also it's not going away. If anything, mental health is going to get worse and worse and worse. So it's really important that we talk about it.
I think, talking from my own experience here, but if we take life as a rule, I personally see it as a bit like a wheel. So it goes down, but it goes back up. Then it goes down, and then it goes back up. It's just the law of physics to a degree. We're never going to be always completely happy. We're never going to always be completely sad and down and blah, blah, blah. But I think it's how we cope with it. In my own case, whilst I certainly don't see myself as depressive or even suffering from anything, because another thing I want to talk about is labelling and how some people sometimes hide behind a label or a name of a whatever. But 4 or 5 years ago now, I had a nervous breakdown, and that was mainly due to a number of circumstances that all came together a bit like the perfect storm, but it was also a drip effect that had started in childhood. I personally didn't want to take medication. I only took the one for panic attacks because that hurts. But for the rest of it, I knew that I was close. I had been close to one, a few years prior. So I thought I have to use my own tools and techniques to get to the bottom of it. So otherwise it's going to happen again. And in my particular case, it was rejection and being a perfectionist. The reason why I share this is because I think that sometimes, we can look at, let's say, depression, anxiety, whatever it is, as the problem, where actually it's only the symptom of something bigger that may have been a part of us for a long time.
Yeah, I think it's never one thing, is it? When we think about any problem that we've had, it's not ever just one thing. It's a multitude of things. So it's looking at all those things, which can be quite tough, to be fair, because like you said, a lot of it can stem from childhood. And if you've had that from childhood, then that is what we call like a core belief, which is basically they feel like facts, yeah? So even though they're thoughts and they're not facts, they feel like a fact. And that can be really, really hard to challenge, really hard to deal with.
And going back to what we were saying about labelling, I think that for me, one of the problems with mental health at the moment is that a lot of people will call themselves depressed or anxious or whatever. There's actually not been a diagnosis. That's what they believe they are, and they then hide behind that, as opposed to actually taking it by the horns and trying to find a way out of how they're feeling, if they're feeling a bit low, and again trying to identify what this is the symptom of, sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it gets bounced around a lot now, doesn't it? Anxiety, depression, and I think a lot of people forget actually like what it actually is. So the first thing with anxiety is that we all have it. It's a completely normal human response to a threat. That's basically what it is, isn't it? So it's normal to feel like that. And if you don't feel anxious, then there's something wrong with you.
Exactly.
But obviously, if it takes over your day-to-day life, then obviously that's when it becomes a problem. And it's similar with, interesting as well with depression. So I'll speak to young people and they'll say, "Oh, I'm depressed." And I think, and I say to them, "Okay, well, tell me what you mean about that." You know, do the classic open question to get them to elaborate what they mean. And most of the time, it's because they've had a bit of a sad couple of days.
Yeah.
And I think, well, like you said as well, like the ups and downs. So I find that fascinating. So there's an amazing video by Jay Shetty. You go into YouTube and put Jay Shetty "Before You Waste Your Life." And he basically says, you know, life is like a roller coaster. You know, no case study to say that your life linear is going to be amazing. Like everyone, even if they're really successful and look like they've had the greatest life ever, that we've all experienced lows, you know. So it's how we deal with those downs. That's the important thing.
And I think this is the thing. I mean, I was in America 18 months ago, whenever it was. And there was I've got to be really careful so that the person can't be identified, but there was someone who I would put down like as very, very young, who was speaking on a stage. And I've got to say, the minute he said, "When I was young," I really switched off, because he then went into this, "I was depressed, blah, blah, blah." And I'm just thinking, you're not even 13 years old. How can you say "when I was young"? Do you know what I mean? And I think this is it. People have got to stop finding issues when there aren't any.
Yeah. And also we all deal with things differently as well.
Exactly.
So I've had a few friends that have had breakdowns, and the response from their friends is like, "Well, she only lost a job, so like I don't really get it." But you know, we all deal with things different, and we don't always know the full picture. You know, we don't know what else is going on for that person. So I think the less judgment, the better.
And do you think that sometimes, say, for instance, going through nervous breakdowns, anxiety, depression, whatever, it's actually part of a journey of self-discovery and how we cope?
Definitely. Like, it makes you who you are, you know, and it's, you know, sadly, life isn't always amazing all the time. That's just life, isn't it? So that's completely normal. It's about how we deal with those crappy times. I always think as well, like if I have a night out with friends, and I think, and it wasn't a very good night out, I think, you know what, I'm not going to moan about that, because we all need the odd not great night out to appreciate the good ones. And it's the same with life, isn't it? Like we all need not so good times to appreciate those beautiful moments that we have.
And I think it's actually quite unrealistic to think that, you know, life is always happy.
Yeah, because that's not life, is it? And again, like social media
I was just about to say about that. Is it because right?
Yeah, well, social media, it kind of brainwashes us again to depict this like real, like this world that we should have, when actually, you know, we need to take it with a pinch of salt, really. But that's easier than said than done, isn't it? When we're on it all day, every day, like no wonder people are brainwashed by it. But yeah, it definitely plays a big impact on mental health, social media for sure.
But then, so we've just discussed, obviously, people who, as far as I see it, don't really suffer from it, feel they suffer from poor mental health, but don't. But then you've got people who generally do. So if you were someone who, for instance, is feeling a bit low and struggling a little bit, what should you look out for to start thinking, actually, maybe I have got a little bit of a problem and maybe I should go and see a doctor? And what sort of signs would we be looking at?
Okay, so signs in general are when it's affecting your day-to-day life. So, you know, again, like I've said, it's normal to feel a bit sad now and again. It's normal to feel anxious. But if it affects your day-to-day life, so it's maybe stopping you from exercising, stopping you from hanging out with your friends, stopping you from going to work, where you're struggling to cope with it, then that's definitely a sign to speak to someone. But you don't necessarily have to speak to someone, because sometimes that can be quite daunting, can't it? Going to your GP and talking about depression and then them putting you on antidepressants, you know, and medication's an interesting one, but there's so many things that you can do before the medication
As
stage.
opposed to resorting to that, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not against medication in general. I just do think that we probably give it out too easily.
I agree.
Again, it's that instant gratification thing. So we want to be fixed, don't we? We want to be sorted out right now. But what people forget is with medication is like, you know, there's loads of side effects. They don't work actually for quite a long time. They take about a month for your body to realise that you've got the tablets in your system. And again, we just need to take ownership. You know, I always say to young people, if you don't look after your mental health and prioritise it, it's not going to prioritise you.
Yeah, but I think the other thing as well is to point out that sometimes some of the changes we're experiencing, and that's not just women, is hormonal, and we forget that.
True, absolutely. I'm like such a sensitive soul. Definitely, for sure. We all experience that very differently. I think everyone forgets about that, to be fair. Because again, we just don't talk about it a lot, do we, with that kind of thing?
But I think it's not even just, you know, at that level. I recall a friend who, to be fair, she didn't have a very good time that particular year. There was a number of issues in her marriage, with death of family, stuff like that. And she ended up on antidepressants. And I said to her, it's got nothing to do with that. Basically, she was going through a change. And what she needed was hormone therapy of some description to help her through. So the mood swings and stuff, the crying, was nothing to do with being depressed and what was going on in her own life.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of there needs to be a lot more work and awareness around menopause, for sure, because you're not yourself. You know, you're forgetful, you're not sleeping so well because you're getting all these night sweats and stuff at night. So yeah,
and it's having the right medication too, because I had the menopause induced 2 years ago for about 6 months. It was a medical induction, shall we call it. So they gave me HRT to cope with that, and actually I reacted extremely badly to that particular HRT, and within 5 days, I had all the signs of clinical depression. I was going to bed at 5 o'clock in the evening because I didn't want to do anything. Luckily, because of what I do, I could recognise that straight away. So I stopped taking the tablets, and within a week I was back to normal, but I was really low. And I think we need to remember that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, and that's another, you know, it's an interesting, like, just changes of medication, general medication can make you feel not yourself, can't it? So, yeah, it's about trying to like think, okay, what's happened lately? That's the key thing with mental health, is noticing changes, and to do, like, I do a little check on myself all the time. Like when I drive, I normally drive on my own. And I work all over Hampshire and Dorset, so I have to drive quite a lot. And that is the perfect opportunity for me to just go, you know what, let's do a little pause.
Yeah.
Am I actually all right at the moment? Because I find I get quite stressed because I work a lot. So I have to like be really mindful of the warning signs of too much stress. So, yeah, which I'm probably over hypersensitive to because I talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
So that's not a good thing, not necessarily a bad thing.
Then I saw a post on Facebook the other day, which actually I thought, fair play, and that's completely right. You see all these things, I'm sure, anywhere across the world, where people say, you know, suicide awareness, I'm here if you need to talk to, my door's always open, blah, blah, blah. And someone said, well, that's all very lovely, but what about you reached out to those who you think are struggling? Because sometimes it's difficult to go and knock on the door.
Oh yeah, it is. Like, I do a little thing with my friends, even the ones I haven't spoken to for a while. I just drop them a text and go, all right, mate, just checking on, like, just touching base. And my friends, I got really poorly last year. I was like off sick for about 3 months. No one knew what was wrong with me, and I got really down. I had basically, it was really bad arthritis for a few months. I'm still got it now, but manageable now. But my friends knew that I was down, and I would just get a text just to say, just touching base, you're okay, and just something simple like that just made me feel better, so that if I did need them, I could speak to them.
And I think what's interesting as well, sometimes it's how it's people that are not so close to you that we pick up the signs. When I had a nervous breakdown, one of the things that was really interesting at the time, I didn't tell anyone, you see, and it was someone that I'd only known for hardly a year that really spotted it first, because
Yeah.
my posting habits on Facebook had changed. I was posting a lot less than I used to. And that's what
Okay.
you do, and that's where you reached out.
That's interesting. So it's interesting when we say about friends, because it doesn't necessarily have to be people that have known us
Yeah, I
forever.
didn't know that guy well at all.
Yeah, I get similar to me last year. I had a friend that asked like another friend on like a Facebook like spiritual group of like what advice to give me, and this woman had never met me, emailed me and said, "Oh, I hear that you're struggling a bit with pain. Do you want some advice about it?" And like, you know, I'm happy to share with you like stuff that I learned with crystals and
Yeah, yeah.
stuff like that. I'm open to anything, you know. When you're really unwell, you'll take any kind of advice, really. But I just thought, I've never even met you, and you're like being really lovely. Do you know what I mean? So
It's bearing in mind that if you see someone, even if you don't know them that well, if you see signs, it's not just about saying to them that the door's open. It's actually you knock at their door and you check that they're okay.
I agree.
You know.
People bounce around this phrase a lot, don't they? Oh, I'm always here for you. But are they? Do you know what I mean? Like, are they really? So it's going like a little bit extra and actually just go around there. Like, don't even say, oh, door's always open. Like you said, actually don't expect them to come to you. Go around there. You know, and again, you don't necessarily have to talk about mental health, because actually that's one of the good bit of advice, really. You don't have to talk about mental health as well. Talk in general, like talk about what they've had for tea, what they watched on telly, like just.
I think the other thing as well is around judgment, and in terms of giving advice, sometimes is not pushing people. When I had said nervous breakdown, I was finding it really hard to go out, because actually I was finding myself more alone in a room full of people than I was on my own. And I recall a particular lunch that I was kind of forced to go to, and oh my god, I can't have been good company for starters, but especially I found it so difficult, it was untrue, and it made me feel worse. Now, so many people try to push their way on us a lot of the time, and I think it's about being mindful that yes, if someone wants to stay at home a bit too much, it's a sign they're not great, but pushing them out because that's what you would do is not right either.
Yeah, love that. So the key thing I've picked up from that, Sophie, is that we all deal with things very differently. And when we think about goals for someone, they're not my goals, they're your goals, you know? Exactly. So it's about like what works for you. When I used to be a drugs counsellor, and I used to be quite hard on my clients, and we used to go through our sort of goals together, and I'd be like, so what's stopping you from getting this goal? And I thought, you know what, these goals are not their goals, they're my goals.
Yeah.
So it made me really think I had to really like have a word with myself, because actually their goal was just turning up to see me. Whereas my goal was to get them off heroin or whatever, you know. So yeah, so it's interesting. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Sometimes we think we're doing the right thing, but not always.
It's little steps as well, I think. It's people understanding that, you know, as you just said, you want to get them off heroin, but they're not going to do that unless they commit within themselves to come and see you.
Yeah, I think it's so important. We have to always remember, when we want to help ourselves or help other people, it's making the steps manageable. So if you think about like a marathon, no one runs a marathon overnight, do they? You have to get that big goal, whatever it is, and you break it right down in manageable chunks. And those chunks could be that you haven't even done anything. It could be that you're just thinking about it. Yes, it's that contemplation stage in the stages of change, where you are literally just starting to think about it. That's great. That's a good step in itself. It's better than being in denial, isn't it? So
and so let's just say that, you know, someone's listening to this is thinking, well, that's all very nice, but I personally can't see the wood for the trees, and I can't see how I'm going to get out of this, because it feels like I'm swimming in wet cement here. So what sort of advice would you give to someone feeling that way?
Yeah, I totally see that, definitely. So I would just do simple things. In fact, I design a lot of resources around well-being, and if anyone wants to download it for free on my website, they can, just on staceymillerconsultancy.co.uk. But I've designed a resource called Top 10 Happy Tips. So I'll briefly go through with them with you. I won't go on one too much because I don't want to bore your listeners. But first one is sleep. So make sure you get enough sleep.
Again, what if you can't because you're struggling?
Okay, so that could be writing stuff down before you go to bed, because your mind obviously wanders around a lot, doesn't it? Because you can't sleep. Starting any meditation before you go to sleep. Turning off any devices. So I always try about an hour before I go to bed. I put my phone on charge in another room. I stop reading, like watching the telly and stuff. And I normally just try and read, because reading's really relaxing. But yeah, making sure your bedroom is very relaxing. So there's not like, you know, lights really bright, or the temperature has to be right as well. Just simple things, really. Getting into a good routine. So try not to nap in the day. Try to go to bed at the same time every night. Again, I've written a resource on sleep as well on my website, so people can just download that for free if they want some brief intervention advice just about getting a better sleep, basically. Because it used to be used as torture, didn't it? And war. Sleep. So yeah, and I'm with you on that. Like, if I don't get enough sleep, then I'm a different human. So tip number 1, sleep. Tip number 2, exercise. Again, it doesn't have to be a marathon. It could be literally just go for a bit of a walk for like 20 minutes. You know, again, it's making those manageable chunks for you. So I know that I exercise every single day, which is probably a bit much. And if I don't, I feel like I've got. So today I'm not doing any exercise today because I've got a really long work day. But tomorrow I'll probably do 2 hours. But it doesn't have to be that crazy. It can be literally just like 10 minutes of a brisk walk once a day. You know, it doesn't have to be anything major. So that's number 2, and that's because it releases endorphins as well, which makes you happy, basically. Number 3, food and mood. So again, I've written a resource on food and mood that people can download on my website. So I actually used to have an eating disorder, and I don't talk about it loads just because it's obviously a personal thing, isn't it? But I have researched big time how food affects basically how you feel, and it's massive, absolutely massive. Because we often think of food and how it relates to your physical health, which obviously it does, but it has a massive impact on basically how you feel. So just simple stuff: eat breakfast. You know, if you struggle to eat breakfast, because I used to be this person, I never used to eat breakfast, just eat like half a banana or like 4 or 5 blueberries, build it up. Reduce your caffeine. Caffeine's not very good for anxiety, so reduce it. You know, eating your 5 a day, stuff like that. So again, loads more tips on my website, so I don't want to go on too much about it because I could talk just about food and mood in one podcast.
Fair enough.
I could. I'm well into that sort of stuff. So number 4, be kind. So it's a bit like, you know, like karma, but the opposite. I'm a massive believer in the law of attraction. You know, like basically put out to the world beautiful things and you will attract beautiful things back, basically.
But if I may, with be kind, I'd add to it, be kind to yourself. Stop beating yourself up all the time because you're struggling.
Yeah, like just again, self-care of just simple things, like don't feel guilty for letting yourself maybe have a lie-in at weekends. Like, you know, you have to really look after yourself, because if you don't, it does catch you up in the end, doesn't it? So yeah, what we do is that's 4 tips. So we've got another 6 more. So number 5, gratitude. One of my favorite things in the world is being grateful, and this is an instant pick-me-up. So if you are feeling a bit rubbish, say 3 things that you're grateful for in the morning, say another 3 things in the evening, but they have to be, and this is the challenge, they have to be quite specific. So you can't just say I'm grateful because I've got a partner or a family. You have to be grateful for, like, what have they particularly done that day? That's, you know, they've done something to help you or whatever. And they also have to be, here's the other challenge, they have to be present. So they can't be, something
20 years ago this happened.
Yeah, so this morning I woke up and I said what I was grateful for. So it was just, you know, simple things like I was grateful that I had the morning free to go, like, just basically just like tidy up and just silly little things that I like doing. I was grateful that I'm doing this podcast today. I'm grateful that I managed to do a little preparation beforehand, just simple things. So yeah, gratitude is easy and we can all do it. So number 6 is about being creative. And again, that's really because we need a way of an outlet of getting rid of our emotions, whether that is a bit of painting. Painting's great, really therapeutic.
It doesn't even have to be anything major. I mean, sometimes I struggle to get into just getting into work, so to speak, because sometimes you just can't be asked. I found that actually having a diary with some nice pens and putting stickers in it and rewarding myself with gold stars and all sorts of crap as if I was 5 years old works for me. So if I struggle to get into work, I just play on it a little bit, so to speak, and I found that I focus a lot more.
Yeah, I do a scrapbook, just it doesn't have to be anything major. Just it's whatever works for you, isn't it? 'Cause we're different. Number 7 is about music, whether that's making it, listening to it. Amazing relationship between music and mood. So if you get stuck, just go on streaming apps for some ideas. If you can't afford having streaming apps, you sometimes have to pay for these things. YouTube, exactly. I do it with meditation. I do so much meditation just from YouTube and there's so much stuff on there as well. Number 8 is kind of meditation, really. It's about focusing on the present and being mindful. It's mindfulness, basically. There's a lovely quote where it says, if we're stressed and depressed, we look in the past. And if we're anxious, we're stressing about the future. And if we're at peace, we are in the moment and present. And that's really important. So my advice to any of your listeners is to at least once a day, do a pause. Literally say it. I'm having a pause. And stop. Because what we do is we work on autopilot all the time. We're on a mission. We don't have a little breather to go, you know what, let's just have a little moment. Am I all right? How's things going today? We don't do that enough, I don't think. And before we notice, life just goes so quick. And the reason life just goes so quick is because we don't do enough of those pauses. So we need to do more of that, for sure. Number 9 is talking or connecting, preferably not always online as well. Getting out there and out and about, talking. If you can't talk, write it down. And then number 10, should be easy, but it's not always easy, especially as we get older with more responsibilities, is to have some time to yourself every day, even if it's just half an hour. So half an hour a day, we should be at least trying to get for ourselves. And that's not necessarily like mine might be the gym, but actually, do I really, really love the gym? No, I don't. So I don't count that half an hour in the gym. Mine might be just literally reading a magazine or painting my nails or something. At least half an hour a day. And if we can have hobbies, that's great. Because again, that's like our coping strategies or distractions as well, which are great. So yeah, they're all real simple things. And you'll notice with those top 10 happy tips, not one was a mental health professional, which I think is interesting when you think that the way we live in this world is like the mental health professional will fix you. When actually, if you look at the key things that make us happy, it's not necessarily a counsellor. And I'm not dissing them because I think they have their place. I just think we need to think a bit more simply and look at little things like sleep, exercise, diet.
And I think sometimes, for instance, I helped at the time he was 17-year-old who had been struggling with anxiety and various issues. And sometimes counselling is not for everybody because it didn't work for him. But the coaching and the NLP and the hypnosis did. And, in 6 months, he managed to do things. He wouldn't leave the house, for instance, because he was scared that people were going to kill him. And he managed to get on a train by himself. He managed to go to the cinema. He managed to do so many things. And I think sometimes, counselling has got its place, as you say, but there are other things out there. And one thing I also wanted to say, which is kind of fitting into your connecting bit, but sometimes we forget the power of animals. Because I know that for me, my cat at the time of said nervous breakdown was a massive thing. because they do need you and they rely on you, and they also do make you happy, and they sense when you're not well or unhappy or whatever. And I think, connecting even with an animal, and even if it's a wild animal, I've got a couple of pigeons at the moment that keep on coming in the garden because I don't know, they like it here for whatever reason. And actually, even you get something from that. You get to know them. I know it sounds pathetic and very little, but actually,
I love it.
It is something to focus on.
I love it. Animals, I'm not actually a huge animal lover, but it's interesting that people always tell me how therapeutic the animals are. Even like walking a dog, getting out the house. They have cat cafes now, don't they? So, it's basically find out whatever it is for you that helps you.
And
all the different.
Going back to the animal side of things for a minute, I have a friend who looks after my cat when I'm away. And the cat is a bit weird. He's got mental health issues of his own, really, because of how he was treated when he was younger. Either way, he doesn't like people. He finds it very hard to get to know people, and it's taken him 3 or 5 years to get to know this guy who looks after him. But as he said, he lives on his own, he's single, he hasn't got animals. But when he comes home, when I'm not here, and the cat greets him, he says he's actually really nice because someone is waiting for you. Someone is happy to see you, even if it's just to feed them. And then they give you attention. And I think we wrap ourselves in our own little bubbles, and we end up being alone and too alone, where even an animal, if you don't feel that you can relate to human beings right now, can help.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And there's no judgment there. There's unconditional love, isn't there? And it's
not with cats. It's not unconditional.
Yeah, I think it's great.
And I think because we're actually getting towards the end of the time, the other thing that I want to really mention is pressure. Not just the pressure from others towards us, but the pressure we put on ourselves. And as you say, having time out for ourselves every day would allow us to not put that much pressure.
Yeah, you said it earlier, which I agree with. My problem is the same, is perfection. So when I went and got help for my eating disorder, they said, look, your main problem is you're a perfectionist. Even when I was writing food diaries, everything was perfect. I was writing stuff down before I'd even eaten it. It was just ridiculous. And I was very obsessive as well. They weren't sure whether I had OCD or not, because I'm quite obsessive. And just want to be perfect. But, I think you've just got to let that go. And it's the imperfections that make us perfect anyway.
Yeah, but I think most people who suffer from mental health issues are perfectionists.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm honest with you, because that's a trait I have seen throughout. Because I do deal with people who struggle with mental health issues as part of my job, obviously, and they're all 99% perfectionists.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily a really bad thing, is it?
No, it's something to bear in mind if you are a perfectionist.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree. I'm definitely much more relaxed on myself now. But we all have our moments, don't we? You included, I'm sure.
Okay, so is there anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
Just one thing really is to always remember that it's a thought and not a fact. So when we have these stupid thoughts in our head saying that we're not good enough, or whatever these thoughts might be, remember that it's not a fact. And if it's a thought, then we can challenge it. So I'd just like to leave you with that, really. Thank you
so much. It was lovely talking to you. And for everybody else, if you enjoyed the show, then please subscribe, leave us a review, but more importantly, come back for the next episode. Thank you.